the people watching my channel really love the Illuvium game. Aaron is one of these co-founders. I'm going to ask him lots of really awesome and in-depth questions surrounding the Overworld, future games coming to Illuvium, and some other topics to do with different things, and even the Illuvials. I'm going to be covering quite a range of topics, and there are going to be more AMAs in the future as well. So if I do not get your question today, there may be other streamers and things like that may be able to ask them to Aaron instead. So don't worry about that. Towards the end of this stream, if we have some time, I am not sure, I will be able to ask some questions from the chat as well. So make sure you're making lots of noise in there, talking amongst each other, to us, reacting to things, doing whatever it is you do. How's it going today, man?
G'day. Thank you for having me. It's a pretty hot one here in Australia on Australia Day. But I guess that's pretty par for the course. I'm excited to go through as much stuff as I can. There might be a couple of things that I can't go into too much detail on, but I'll try to answer as best as I can.
I guess this wasn't really on my list, but the first thing I should ask is how are you feeling about Illuvium? Are you excited for the open beta in particular, or you're more excited for the future Illuvium has ahead of it in the next 5-10 years?
I think there's different types of excitement for different things. So for example, the open beta is where we will be able to connect everything together on the open, IMX blockchain, and then it'll all be real. Everything that people will get will be their real assets. So I'm very excited about that. Also, just purely because we've been developing it now for 3 years, and it's been a lot of work, and it would be really cool to get to that milestone. But then, me personally, I'm always the one who's trying to look for what is the next thing. It's often that when I come onto these interviews that my head is in a space of working on something that I sometimes can't even talk about because, the development comes after sort of the direction. And that sort of makes me always looking towards the future. So I guess I have all these different little milestones, open beta, and then what I would say is the final version of the product, which will actually be pretty significantly different from the open beta. And then while that's happening, we start developing the other games, and each one of them is going to be their own cool and amazing little thing. So for me, it's very hard to say that I will just be excited about one thing. It's just this constant stream of things that we'll do. I think sometimes people get a little bit, I wouldn't say jaded, but they get very used to the idea that we're pretty open. We're very open with the leaks that we have. And it's like, I have a dog that's been growing up for 5 months, and you just never realize how quickly they grow until you actually step back and look at a before and after picture. But on any given day, it feels like it's pretty constant. And I think that sometimes the community can feel that way because they see so many things. They never really get that sort of milestone feel. And we're hopefully trying to be able to give you guys a little bit of that. We've been a little bit more secretive in the last 3 months as we build some new stuff. And hopefully that will allow us to release some cool things for you guys that you'll go, oh, wow, I didn't realize that that was going to be the case.
Yeah, I think even with Arena, there weren't many leaks. Now they started getting leaked about 2 weeks beforehand, and then we got Arena dropped, and it was really fun. It was really interesting to see that milestone come to life. And part of me is very glad you're doing it that way. At the same time, I really want to know what new features are coming. So there are going to be some questions, but the first thing actually pertains to that. Okay, so the overworld is currently not particularly engaging. What features are planned to resolve this for the open beta?
I think that the most important thing for people to remember about the open beta is that that's when the actual the whole system will be real, right? A lot of people they underestimate the value of having real assets that you own, that you can trade. And the important thing to remember is that it's the best way that I can describe it is that in most games that don't have NFTs or that are just single player games, really what you're investing in is your time, and you're getting items that don't really mean that much except for the time that you spend on them. So a pre-release version is very similar to what the final release version is going to be. And so there's not that much difference. With us, it's hard for people to get fully engaged with it because part of the value of, opening a pack of cards and getting something like a Charizard or a Pikachu or something like that is that, bam, you now own something that is going to be pretty valuable, right? So I think the main part that what people are missing is that when you capture something, when you fuse it, when you start playing with it, it doesn't go anywhere. And that's a large part of the value proposition. The important thing for people to see is when I get that, the next step is I have to play with it because that's going to increase its experience. That's going to allow me to level it up to the point where I can fuse it. Then once I've done that, I'll be able to go and, play my friend over in Arena. And maybe before, they beat me because they had a really nice wildfire deck. And so I'm trying to combat it by trying to get some, maybe some water Illuvials or something like that. So now I actually have a purpose to go out into a region where I can find these things. And so I'd say that the main thing there is purpose. But in terms of the features that we're doing, there are a lot of little extra things that we're adding to the game that will be revealed probably in the next 2 weeks if we can if we can get it going well and get a good version of it. Then there will be a release that I think everyone will be super excited about. That is just one part of the features that we are adding to the game. Remember, at the moment, there's only 3 regions that people can play in. At least in a private beta sense, we'll be opening up some other areas for testing at some point, even if they're not available for the open beta. Even if they're fully developed, they still won't be available for the open beta because there is one very large mechanic that people will be trying to achieve, which is unlocking the regions. So I think the other thing that people are missing with the game, besides features in the overworld, is that sense of story-driven purpose. And there's not that many people that understand what are you as a player. And that really matters. Most people need to be sort of bedded down as, okay, who am I, right? If you're playing Portal, you're the daughter of one of the employees and you're stuck there and you're doing these puzzles. If you're Link, you're there to save a princess. In our game, everybody gets to be their own person. Eventually, that world will expand to be a multiplayer MMO style world where everyone has a persistent character and they don't yet really know their purpose. All that they know is that the ship has crashed. That's it, right? So I'm currently heavily involved in developing the intro, right? We have an intro sequence which will be around about 15 minutes, which will guide Overworld players through the mechanics that we have and how everything works. But it's not a tutorial in the sense of just being like a map that you go to and it's just got some basic stuff. It is literally how we feel that you should experience the game. So it'll take you from you've crashed, you get to understand who you are. I'm not going to tell you who you are, but people can, I guess, theorycraft on what that is. I'm not saying that it's the most exciting thing in the world, but it's important for people to understand that. So when you open up the game, you will see a cinematic that's roughly 3.5 minutes long that will give you some context for everything that's happened in the background. We've shown a couple of leaks of screen grabs from that cinematic, but that will allow you to sort of see this meta context of what's going on with the Verlaine and how it all works. And then when the controls are handed to you, it'll be explained to you who you are. And then what is your purpose while you're in this world? And I think that that is a big part of the game that we need people to be able to get before that they can really engage with it and enjoy it. And before we build all of that, we need to get you to look through the movement mechanics, the shooting mechanics, how capturing will look. Capturing is not quite perfect at the moment because we hadn't got all of the animations for the previous beta. The next one, I believe we will have all of those animations. So instead of seeing like a placeholder, you'll actually see, you know, there's there's even one, I think it's maybe Tater P, where as it's getting, you know, sucked into the drone, its tongue is like holding it down, and all of that will give you a sense of like connection with the characters. And so there's just all these little pieces that come together that will make the game feel much more alive. And then post open beta, we are still open to a lot of different mechanics. I have some favorites of mine that we're doing testing on now to see whether or not that they would be fun to implement into the game. I think Grant spoke about them previously, things like the plants in the world being a little bit more hostile, and that being at the very least a bit of a nuisance for you. There is a very deep lore around the plants actually being hostile. They're at the very least very hostile to Illuvials, and that is one of the reasons why there are things that you get inside of them, but that's not confirmed. That would definitely be post open beta, but it would add that extra little bit of engagement. I know there's a lot of people out there that just want to go around with a rocket launcher and blast stuff. So that would give people a sense to be able to go and blast stuff. It might not be with a rocket launcher, but remember, you're building up weapons and suits and stuff like that. So they will be of big use in the overworld, not just in Arena.
Okay. Guys, give me a minute. There's a lot to unpack there, all right? But the one thing that caught my attention, in particular that caught my attention, some in the chat, I think, have said they've heard it before. But can you explain to me what the Villain is? I've never heard that before.
So that is the race of people that you are. So the Villain are the people that are on the ship that crash. And they have a purpose, right? And there is maybe differing ideas amongst them about what their purpose is. I can't go into the real backstory for the game, but when we go into the open beta, you will have to pick a faction, and the faction will determine there's this overall purpose that we're trying to go towards, but then each faction sort of has a different little spin on that purpose and different sort of way of thinking about the world. One of the factions is maybe a little bit more mystical. One of them is a little bit more scientific. One is more pragmatic. And at the very start of the game, you get to choose which faction you are. To begin with, I'll be perfectly honest, isn't going to have a huge impact outside of that main purpose. But as we build out into other games, especially things like Illuvium Zero with the Megacities expansion, Illuvium Zero is going to be our place to basically throw in all of the new cool things that people want to build. And you can't just go to Sanctum Mesa and build out humongous big things because it's a very small place. It can do things like forging a weapon or forging a suit. If you want to build a spaceport, you can't do that in Sanctum Mesa. You can't have it in your inventory, right? So you will have to have it in a very large area, and that's the purpose of megacities in the long scale state, right? There will be new buildings that will come out with the megacities expansion, but then over time, anytime we have some new expansion to the game that requires people to do something, we want to funnel that almost exclusively through Illuvium Zero, right? The real idea is that people who own those plots of land need to also feel a sense of purpose. And that main sense of purpose is they're the industry of this world, right? And like there will be certain things that you get outside of Illuvium Zero. I've heard people say everything should go through Illuvium 0. I strongly disagree. I think that there's certainly places to give rewards for things that people do in Illuvium Beyond, especially if we get approval to make a casual card game around that. And there will be achievements that you get across all of our systems that allow you to basically unlock perks, and they will be really fun. But the big things like, hey, maybe eventually you want to get off this planet. Remember, it's just one planet in a very large galaxy. Maybe you want to get off the planet. You're not going to go to the 0 Point Forge and just forge yourself a spaceship. You're going to need either yourself owning a plot of land in Illuvium 0, or you're going to have to license that out to someone who has to spend possibly weeks and a lot of resources to build out your ship. And you're going to have to pay him a lot, right? And that's going to mean that there's a lot of transactional nature to our game. These are all more longer term plans for extra games, but it's important for us to really bed down what our world is going to be overall so that people can understand why they're going into our game versus another. There are plenty of games out there that are very casual in nature where you can just go and pick it up, play, have a bit of fun and stop. Ours is meant to be incredibly permanent because that's really one of the only reasons why you would have NFTs with it. Our game is meant to be, I guess, more of like a thought experiment around what if you had these really awesome collectible cards and they weren't just physical cards, which mean that you can only really play card games with them. But if you take them to the next generation and you can build computer games around them, what would you do to build out that universe? And that is effectively what we're trying to do with all of our systems. So the general idea is everywhere we want there to be some level of persistence.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It drives me mental when people try to integrate NFTs into things where it doesn't make any sense. Even with the success of World, people are asking for Web3 integration, but it doesn't fit with the game. You would actually kill a lot of the facets of the gameplay by doing something like that. And maybe there are other ways, but I think Illuvium's built itself around this idea of the permanence, like you were saying.
It's interesting. There was there's been games that to me were very clearly games that were in development, and then the NFT craze hit, and they sort of just went, we're just going to hook into that craze. I remember reading the white paper for My Neighbor Alice, and they literally had in there, we're going to do the blockchain stuff later, right? And to me, that was one of these moments where it's like, I don't think that's going to work because we had already been planning out probably 6 months at that point. And I remember coming up against hurdle after hurdle after hurdle of different reasons why just integrating NFT technology just can't work unless you solve those problems. And a large part of it is like, what is the purpose of the game? Something like World is a cool game, but I think that they would do a lot worse if they just made it NFTs, right? Because the game has been designed in a way that it doesn't really matter if you've got a lot of something, right? Mm-hmm. In our game, it absolutely does matter if you find a way to just generate thousands of Illuvials. It makes them lose that sense of value. Whereas the fundamentals of a card game really match up with the NFT space well, because you're talking about physical cards. They have a physical cost to create. They have a physical cost for people to purchase them. And it limits the supply just enough that you can keep minting them if you want, but only so far as you have the demand for them. And so you end up with a nice balance. And so using that card game style of economy as the basis for everything, I think is the perfect way to look at it. But it does mean that there's just a million things that you would think of that you end up saying, no, can't do that. And it's our job to try and sort of thread that needle and find a way to give people a fun game, or more specifically, a large number of fun games that allow them to sort of live in our universe. Illuvium Overworld at the moment definitely needs some features added to it to get to that place. But as I said, we're getting through them. Arena is closer to that. But obviously, there's still some things that we need to do, some testing to make sure that the game gets better. But then every game that we do will be the same, right? Illuvium Zero, again, will also be about the economy mostly, and being sort of that generator of industry inside of our ecosystem. But it also needs to have some cool features added to it that just engage people on a daily basis that we're working through. It's part of being before even an open beta, and it just takes a little bit of time and a lot of feedback from the community to help us to work out what resonates with them, what doesn't. With Arena, we've taken a lot of that on board. We're going to showcase something maybe in about 2 or 3 weeks to show our way that we're going forward with it, at least assuming internally we like the way that it's testing. And then we'll probably put it towards the people as a bit of like an A/B test. Here's Arena Classic, or rather Ascendant Mode Classic, and then here's the new and improved one. And you guys can let us know what things you like about it. And we go from there, right? It's definitely a symbiotic relationship with our community.
Yeah, I think that's a really good step forward, doing sort of an A/B test. But just backtracking slightly to features that the community really wants in the game. And this question is really important. I want to move on to future games soon, but this question is really important. We've just seen Grant post the leak of Illuvials roaming in the overworld. Like, I think that's really important, and clearly the community got very excited and really rallied behind it. And I think personally, having Illuvials roaming in the overworld while you're adventuring, even if you don't interact with them, which I hope you don't do, I hope you do interact with them, but even if you didn't, it would certainly make the overworld feel a whole lot more alive. Do you think we're going to get that soon?
So all I can tell you about features related to that is to sit tight. We'll show you what we've got. I think that there are people that will sort of extrapolate that and say, you know, what you're going to show us is something like insane that maybe we can't do for a little while, right? Other people will be a little bit more conservative with what it means, and we'll probably be somewhere in the middle in terms of what we're going to show you. I personally really like the mechanic that we're building because it beds the world into a sense of reality. At the moment, when you play there, it's very different from what we see as the reality of our world, right? There's been a vision for what our world is since the beginning. You saw it in the original gameplay trailer, right? And that vision is what we have seen as like the long-term goal for at least to open beta, right? So for example, there's games out there where you can go around and ride on all of your Illuvials and fly around to different places. That won't be there. It may eventually be something that we do, and it's a very cool concept that we'll look towards. I think people will start to feel a much more sense of bond with their drones, right? They're companion drones for a reason. And I think that there's a lot of things that we could do there that even Grant was ideating out 3 years ago. You know, the way that you move through the world could significantly change based on your drone. They are very powerful. They're probably more powerful than people even realize. And once people realize how powerful they are, they're even more powerful than that, right? So I think that I would like to build that sense of bond and connection with the drone to the Ranger. I'm not sure if it works for our game to have that bond specifically with the Illuvials in the same sense. I think it's important, but how that manifests in our game, I think, will be something that we'll look at over time. But within, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks, we hopefully will have a video that will go out showing what we've been working on in the overworld. And hopefully then that will increase the excitement over what you've already seen. What you saw was something that was done quite a long time ago now. And I'll be perfectly open and honest with it. it was that video was more of like a concept, and all it was us just placing the Illuvials in the world and roaming around, which technically we have had for at least 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we do all of our testing, that we have like testing worlds that are effectively just blank spaces with, like ledges, so that we can work on the ledge grabbing mechanics. And I don't know if you guys know about grappling hooks, but there may be a grappling. Okay, the grappling hook is something that we've been testing, and the point of all of that is that we have this place to test all of these different things. The big issue that we come into is something I don't think a lot of people realize until they actually see it, which is we have by far the most high fidelity graphics in this space. And while it might not be quite up there with the very latest AAA games that are trying to be ultra realistic, even in a stylistic way, it is incredibly realistic what we're doing. We have, grass simulations, we have physics simulations on the plants. Everything is rendered to a very insanely high degree. Everything is done custom. There's no procedural graphics that we have. We have little, things between the seams of rocks where there's sands and stuff like that to make it feel as real as possible. But the downside of that is when you have these really high fidelity creatures and these worlds that are very close to being real in terms of the undulating terrain and stuff like that, it becomes much more difficult to just put something into the world, right? You look at something like Minecraft, and because it is so blocky, the way that the animations work, where it's just like the character can jump and no animation is done, right? If your ranger did a jump and we didn't have an animation or a janky one, or when you rotate, there's no interpolation, so you just go from here to here in a single frame, it would look much more jarring, right? So what that ends up doing is it puts a massive extra load on our technical artists to be able to make it look real. So Elden Ring is probably a pretty good example. There are many situations in Elden Ring where you're fighting some boss and all of a sudden it'll walk to some much higher ledge and it just goes straight up there, and straight down. There's no smoothness to it. And most people probably at the level that they've done it don't really mind. So we're probably okay with like that level of what I would call jankiness. We're not looking for it to be like it's cinematic. I think that we're still probably about 5 years away from having the technology to do that. But at the very least, we can't be Minecraft and have it look good, right? So there's just a lot more development in terms of our inverse kinematics and all of these sort of things, which we've already done very well for the Ranger. The Ranger, in my opinion, looks quite smooth in the Overworld. And we now, if we were to put Illuvials in the Overworld, we have a lot of work to do in terms of allowing them to look natural, look like, real creatures, they're real creatures in the world. And we want to showcase them in their best light. And if we just did it like in a half-assed sort of a way, it would be received much worse than another game with much lower fidelity graphics doing the same thing. It's just a little bit harsher on us than it is on some other things. And we knew that going in, but that was the choice that we made. And now it's just a matter of putting in the effort to get things such that we really like it, Then the next thing is if we make another game, like for example, if we did a kart racer, we would almost definitely go in a completely different art direction, right? When you go to select your character for that kart game, you would see incredibly detailed rendered Illuvials on the cards, and you would be able to be like, yep, that is Atlas. That I know. I imagine I could just pet him. Is that good? When people see our NFTs, nothing comes close, right? Nothing at all in the world comes close to what we're doing for digital art collection. But when you go into a kart racing game, it would almost certainly be that we want to make that a mobile game, which means we need to reduce the fidelity of the graphics, but it'll also rapidly speed up development because in our cart game, we can just rotate the carts and it'll be totally fine. We don't have to learn how to do the physics calculation of, how much should there be a tilt on the wheels of the cart and stuff. Because if we had everything be super, super high fidelity, the audience would expect more when it comes to those small little details. So we just want to let people know that there definitely will be different graphical fidelities as we build out other games. We could make a 8-bit style of game. We already did a test of that about 2 years ago. We made a giant mouse pad that had all of our 8-bit characters on there. Remember, this is a whole intellectual property. So you've seen it with our emotes, both the fixed and the animated emotes, that they're very cartoony style. We could do a whole game in that cartoony style. We could do Minecrafty blocky style. And as we go lower down in the fidelity, it'll rapidly speed up the development of the games and allow people to use their Illuvials in lots of cool different ways.
Yeah, I mean, Illuvium truly does have one of the best building blocks in the entire Web3, and even against many big studios in the Web2 space, and one of the best art teams as well. And you guys are definitely working through that. So
100%.
I appreciate it. So the next question I've got actually comes from Sky. For anyone who doesn't know, I made some tweets. So I took a bunch of the comments down there. I didn't get to all of them, but hopefully we can get to some of them. Sky is asking what sort of social elements are coming to Overworld in the near future.
Yep. So the major social element is not just Overworld. It's like an account-wide thing, which is our chat platform, effectively our social platform. So that is currently pretty far into development. It needs to connect in with IMX passports, and we're partnering with a third party to be able to give us some of the tools to do that. So when I say across all sort of platforms, there will be, I guess, what you would call local chat, which means like people around you. Now, if you're playing in Arena, that would mean your opponent, right? You'll be able to talk to your opponent, which I think is a really cool thing. Obviously, we need to work a little bit on profanity filters and blocking chat and stuff. I think that's a given, right? Because if you beat me in the game, I'm going to be raging at you, and you probably don't want to read it, so you'll block me. But in general, that is the major part of the social features. Like I said, there will be factions, which eventually will lead into you being able to see people who are of your faction. So you're sort of like, maybe not like, some sort of secret society or something like that, but you'll be able to know who's of a particular faction. We will have friend lists available, so you'll be able to invite friends and accept friend requests, remove a friend, etc., etc. That will allow you to talk to people as you're going on a run. Probably not for the next beta. We probably won't have guilds because there's a bit of extra work to do there in terms of like who runs the guild. But I'll be honest, we're going to do it in a bare bones way. So maybe we get it in and it's fairly bare bones, and it just means you can make a guild and invite people to guilds. But outside of possibly handing over who owns the guild, there won't be much available for people at the beginning. This is something that we'll build over time. Obviously, these are all of the features that we want to do to take us from what we would call an open beta to a finished, polished version of the game. The finished, polished version of the game will absolutely have like a guild chat that you can speak to people in, and it'll ping you no matter what game you're playing and allow you to read what your guild are talking about. You'll be able to invite people. Eventually, we might be able to have like multiple guild leaders and all sorts of stuff like that. Outside of that, there are a couple of cool social features that we're testing. We already have them internally, but I don't think they'll make it for open beta. One of them is a type of multiplayer where you'll see people in Sanctum Mesa. So remember, Sanctum Mesa is a little bit different from the other places in the world, purely from we'll call it the fake world physics of that you've crashed onto inside of that dome, right?
Yeah.
It means that when people are there, you sort of see everyone. Now, we won't be able to have everyone in one zone. There'll be instances of that zone, which, yeah, maybe it breaks the immersion just a tiny bit, but there's limitations to hardware. We can't have a million people running around in the world. It'd be really, really weird. But once that is in there, that same local chat that you have inside of Arena will sort of translate over, and you'll be able to see people talking in the world. They'll be able to help you out, and then it's not really it's no more of a multiplayer than what I'm talking about in Sancta Mesa. The plan is to allow some type of pseudo multiplayer in the regions. It absolutely won't be about sharing and cooperating with each other to defeat things. That would definitely be part of another game, but it could be very helpful as a way for you and your friend to effectively do, like, my kids are young enough now. We have these like parallel play dates where the kids are together, but they might be doing their own thing, right? So you might be in the world and you're doing your thing, and there's just some company there, right? And it probably doesn't make sense as to why that works in our world, but it comes down to a little bit about the lore of the way everything works. So yeah, there could be a way for you to have a little bit of comfort in seeing that there's other people around. Don't worry, they're not going to steal your stuff, but you'll be able to wave to them. You'll be able to dance around with them, and they might be able to help you. And they can't help you fully, because remember, they're not with you and they don't see exactly what you see. So, but they might be able to like teach you how to jump to get up onto some high level. And we hope that will start to facilitate some good friendships around in the world. Maybe some really expert person, you watch them doing crazy types of jumps and mechanics, and then you go, oh geez, how is he doing that? And then you shout out and they show you.
It gives me vibes of back to Elden Ring, where you can leave the soapstone messages.
Yeah.
And like you'll go here and you'll see a message on the ground, you'll read it and it'll say, look left. And so when you walk in front, you don't get backstabbed by some skeleton.
Yeah.
And I like that idea.
Yeah.
Sure.
It'll be slightly different, but and I'm not going to say it's going to be the thing that makes or break the game, but it should be quite interesting.
So the next one I've got here is from Muffin Man. And I know your thoughts on this with the free market and everything like that, but I'd like just to go a little bit deeper than that on what you think would be beneficial for Illuvium, where he's asking, what do you think would be good price points for the Overworld stage runs?
So we're actually looking at a bit of a review on that at the moment, purely because of some of the mechanics that we're doing for Arena. One thing that becomes apparent as you start to think about more and more games is Arena. We're looking at, let's call it 20 to 30 items, right, that you take in as a team. Okay, if we do a kart racing game, just to keep that analogy going, I'm not saying we're working on a kart game at the moment, we're not, but if you went into a kart racing game, I can't imagine us allowing you to bring in more than, say, 3 or 4 or 5 things, whatever they happen to be, and probably one alluvial, or maybe 3, and there's like a tag team thing where you have to race separate ones, and when one gets destroyed, another one comes in. It's actually a pretty decent idea. I might write that down. But you won't be able to get that many things in there, and so there'll be a little bit of a disparity between sort of what it costs to play Arena versus what it costs to play other games. We're looking at ways, and this is not really a leak, but you'll see what we're doing in a couple of weeks' time. We're looking at ways to make the amount of things that you bring into Arena a little bit smaller, right? And if that's the case, it does a lot of cool things for us. The first one, and the main reason for doing it, is it reduces the complexity of the team builder by a significant margin. And we're finding that that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. They take a lot of time doing that. They go into the game, they work out that wasn't a good strategy because they've never seen the game before. And then it's like, okay, I've got to go back into the team builder and add a lot of things in. And it feels burdensome. So we definitely need to reduce that complexity. There is a way for us to reduce it by a very significant margin, but that would put us closer to the what I would call the average amount of stuff that you'll need per game. And that being the case, it probably means that we can adjust the price points so that each individual alluvial is probably a little bit more valuable, and keep the overall cost of entry the same, because there's far fewer things, but they cost a little bit more. But I'm always of the opinion that we should make the costs reasonably manageable for people, at least on the order of what it takes to play Magic the Gathering, something like that. But also, we have 75 free-to-play characters, and then a whole bunch more characters that are very low level, which should be perfectly acceptable to go and play in one of our games. So while there could be teams that are reasonably expensive, we also want people to be able to come in with a team that is almost zero cost, and they just add a tiny bit over time and don't have to spend that much money, because the real key is getting a lot of people into the game, getting them hooked onto the games, getting them wanting to go out into the overworld and collect. And then once they've got a decent portion of them and they've been playing for a while, then they can start to say, you know what, maybe I do want to capture a lynx. Maybe I want to get one of those, pterodactyl ones that I've been hearing people talk about. And they'll obviously be a little bit more expensive, but at the end of the day, we do want it to be accessible for a large number of people. So, and when I talk about like what is a good price point, if we go out with a particular price and people don't want to pay it, the price comes down, right? It's one of the beauties of it. You instead of spending $1 to get one fuel, next week, if the price is off, it'll be you spend that same $1 and you get 10 fuel. Right. And suddenly runs become significantly cheaper. So it'll balance itself out to a point where the most number of people are willing to pay it. But it's always been part of our strategy that we have a significant number of very good quality, awesome alluvials, which are our tier zeros, which we've put no less effort into, because we want people to be able to get a full experience of the game, be able to grind through as much of it as possible before they start to realize, hey, it would be good to get some other ones. But at that point, they've really shown, hey, I love the game and I didn't have to pay anything for it. That's a super important part of our model.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. And until you said it, I forgot about the other future games in the world where even if you want Arena to be under $100 or whatever, you want your kart racer to be over 10 or between 10 and 20 or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
So we need to keep all of that in mind, and maybe simplifying Arena is a really good answer. I actually really like where your head's at with that, and I'm going to leave it up to the team, but I think that's a really smart way of thinking about it. I hope people in the chat really understand kind of where Aaron's at with all that. But we'll have to move on from here for now. So looking into future games in the I have no idea how much time you have for this, by the way. So just let me know in a minute. But for future games, Nick has a question where, can you please share some product feature roadmap alpha for the Overworld, Arena, Zero, and beyond post open beta?
So I can't show what we've got internally because it needs to be approved, and then it will go to council first before it goes out to the community. But any roadmap that we have, I think needs to be fully understood that we need to have approval for everything we do, right? When it comes to small things like, minor features inside of the games that we already have, and maybe some things such as lore to begin with, the community sort of trusts us on that. But when it comes to what I would call expansions or new products, they all need to be approved. So anything that I have internally that I would want to do is going to be definitely just my thoughts. There are a few games that I would consider making first. A lot of them are for pragmatic reasons because we have most of the assets available for them, and we already have done internal testing for other things, like, for example, multiplayer in Sancta Mesa. lends itself to the idea of, hey, we could just have a multiplayer shooter, right? Multiplayer shooter using our assets would be something that we could rapidly develop, right? And what I would love to see is just chucking it out to people there in a complete alpha state and saying, go nuts, tell us what's good, what's bad, right? We know that it's nowhere near the finished product, but just, hey, here's our movement mechanics in a world where you're trying to beat the crap out of each other. What do you like? What do you know? You know what I mean? Like really do a lot of very early on testing in that way. And then use that feedback to build out, well, what are the game modes going to be? I had a concept for a third-person shooter well before we got even close to started with Arena. And since then, we've had a couple of people on the team come up with their own ideas for what they would like it to look like. Roger has got one that he would be keen on. Andre, who runs the Overworld project, he is definitely keen on that. So some form of that is something that I would really like to do. A, it would be super fun. B, it's a totally different demographic. It's really in that fast-paced, fast twitch sort of a space, whereas most of the stuff that we have at the moment is more strategic. And then there's other games that I think would be really, really cool to build. My personal favorite would be a kind of like a battle royale, but it's actually, I feel a little bit annoyed because League of Legends or Riot has already sort of made something close to what I was considering building, which is they actually have a game mode called Arena, right? Which may turn into a full mode, but it's effectively like a very cut down version of a MOBA where it's just you and a partner synergizing together and battling against it's like you versus another team, and then you versus another team, and then you versus another team. I have a whole story built around why that would work in our system. It would only work after the end of season 1 because of some story elements that will come into the overworld, which will fairly significantly change the world. But I really like the idea of that sort of a game. It would lead us towards building a MOBA later on. We already have most of the assets there through Arena. And it would just be about, instead of changing it to be an auto battle version, to just giving you full control of those characters, right? You would have control of the ranger. That would be your character. And I think this is the real key throughout all of our systems is we're planning on a lot of things to make your character something that is permanent in the world, permanent and unique, right? Once you get a character that you like, it should be something that is only available to you, right? And then you should really feel ownership that that is you. It's why when people look at Beyond and they think about the profile pictures and stuff like that, I say that Beyond as a profile picture is a very small part of it, because really the identity of a person inside of our game will come from the ranger. That is who you are. Even when you're in the auto battler, you're sort of just temporarily taking over the role of the drone for the purposes of that. But you're really the ranger, right? That's who you are. That's who we want you to connect with. So some sort of like a dungeony arena style game, I think our one lends itself way better than what exists with the League of Legends version, because in their game, you pick fixed characters that you don't really own. It's just, I want to pick this one, my friend wants to pick that, and they synergize. Ours would be you are yourself, and what your abilities are and how you interact, whether or not you're, I guess, a fighter, scion, that sort of level, that will come down to the team that you bring in, right? And I would suggest that the best way to handle that is very similar to the idea that I had originally for our real-time strategy game, which is you can infuse an alluvial into a building, which makes the things that come out of that, the robots that come out of there, if you infuse it with Axodon, then your tanks are going to have a water-based shield, right? And that opens us up to a million possibilities in terms of how the game plays out. I would do something very similar with a action-based battle royale MOBA, because then you get to configure your character exactly the way that you want. Maybe you bring in 4 alluvials, and each one sort of acts as a particular part of what your character is. Doesn't really make much sense at the moment, because there's no such thing as, I guess, infusing an alluvial into a building or infusing an alluvial into your suit, right? But there is a way to make that happen, assuming we can get through to the end of set 1, where there'll be some upheavals of the story which allow those sort of things to happen, and you'll be able to play your card from not just onto the board, but lots of different ways, and that just opens up the world in a large number of ways. So I would make whatever the next game is that we do, I would 100% say that it should not be strategy, even if something like a MOBA or action RPGs, maybe a tiny bit of strategy. I would 100% go the way of it being full on action. It certainly wouldn't be like Dota or League of Legends, where you play a 40-minute match and there's teammates going around. You have to think about all the strategy. It would be you and a friend, or maybe you and a few friends, just go straight in, bash the other team, get out after 10 minutes, go into the next match, have another go. It would be very action-based, because we want to try and open up our world to a number of different demographics. Right? We'll hit that very tactical auto battler style of person with Arena, but we're not going to get the fast twitch, shooter-based people with that game. So we would have to build that sort of a thing. And to me, those are like the 3 main pillars: is one heavily strategized game, one heavily sort of like fast twitch skill-based shooting type game, and then the last one would be something which is more of an action RPG. They're very popular games. They cover, a wide variety of the space. But who knows? Maybe the community says, no, we only want Hearts Ablaze. Give us a dating simulator. And then we got to go and make a dating simulator, right? And then we do it. And that's the way that it is. But maybe that's a different demographic altogether that we've got to sort of connect in with at some point. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people tend to forget sometimes that Dota came from Warcraft, and then TFT in some roundabout extension, or Dota Underlords, came from Dota. And so like all these games keep branching off with the assets they already have and building new things. And even Diablo probably used a lot of similar assets from other Blizzard titles to help build out that world, and at least the back end code and things like that. So this is the natural progression for a studio like this. And I think Illuvium, with the way it's doing the third person style gameplay and the top down characters TFT style gameplay, we've got a lot of the assets ready for pretty much anything except a racer or whatever, right? So, or
maybe a dating simulator, but yeah, we've got. That was why we did it, right? Originally, we sat down and we had to decide what games we were going to build. The whole purpose was build it. We knew that we needed to interconnect a lot of games together, and so the idea was a gradual progression across these different spaces. Hopping from one island to another, and instead of going from here all the way to the other side of the ocean, just go through little islands along the way where you can make little tiny changes, right? Going from what we have in Arena to an action RPG is mainly about the control system, right? At the moment, it's all automated. We got that part of it, add in the control system so that when a unit is told to move over here, it's not because the internal engine decided it should go over there. It's because you clicked over there. We have all of the walking done to do that sort of stuff already, right? It'll walk there smoothly. We could set up a template for this very quickly. The only reason we don't is because we're sort of rushing as fast as we can towards getting the games that we are building done. But then absolutely, we should leverage the existing assets that we have to make the next games a lot easier. And people also don't really appreciate when you're building a blockchain game, there is just a massive amount more plumbing to do on the back side that, if you just have a game on your computer and you just access it through your hard drive, things are a lot easier. When you have to make multiplayer games, it is definitely a significant step more difficult. When you have to make a multiplayer game that connects up with the blockchain, it's even harder still. And when you need it all to be persistent and to be able to show everyone stuff for everyone with a marketplace, with an exchange that allows people to generate assets, right? We have to be like bank level secure, right? Because fuel is effectively our economy, and it's through a game. You can't just say, oh, well, if someone hacks it, oh, well, right? If someone is able to hack fuel creation, then they can crash the economy, right? So we need to treat all of that like very, very much more seriously than what you could just do any random prototype. We built a test bed for a shooter. When I say we, I was not a part of that at all. Two people, mainly one, over a weekend had a system set up where people are running around in the overworld shooting at each other and killing each other, right? One weekend, right? That's all it took, okay? Once you have all of the infrastructure there, yes, it does take a bit of time to go from a very, very rough model to a fully finished game that's polished with testing and all the rest of it. But it took us a massive amount of time to get to the point where we could play test Arena and Overworld because we had nothing, right? We had to build everything from scratch. We have to build all of our connection pieces to IMX from scratch. There's just a huge amount of work that's gone in the back side. So when we say that we have over 100 people working on the team, we don't mean that we have 100 game developers, right? There are web developers building out apps like staking and the exchanges and the website and all that sort of stuff. And then there's other people building out backend technology that connects in with the blockchain that wouldn't need to exist if you were doing a standard multiplayer game. And you wouldn't even need any of the backend stuff if you were just building it out as a single player game, right? So there's a huge number of people that go into building out the infrastructure that we need. They don't get really much recognition for what they do. Mostly we see artists and occasionally the devs get a little bit of the credit because it's so much easier to praise cool art. But there's a crazy amount of optimizations and new innovations that go into all of our stuff for both our infrastructure team, our backend team, our web team. We have a number of incredible people. It's not just blockchain and art and a few devs. There's a whole swath of other people behind the scenes doing a lot of work. And once they've done that, the next game goes a lot quicker. And maybe it doesn't get like asymptotically towards zero, but maybe it gets to the point where we can put out a really good prototype of a game in 6 months, right? And then we generate, because we want to make about 10 games, and that will be a lot easier to do once we have the majority of the asset base. And once we've sort of sorted out what our ecosystem really is, right? It's very hard to know when you're building something that no one has ever attempted before, exactly the best way to do it. And that takes time. And we're getting to the point where we're much more mature with that. Our open beta launch will give us way more info about the things that we need to build. And if we need to adjust things, we will. That's what we've always done.
Yeah, again, a lot to process. I do want to just quickly mention to the chat that we did hit 200 concurrent viewers for a little bit across Twitter and YouTube, which is the most I've had on a live stream in a very, very long time. So I'm just glad to see the community showing up for this momentous occasion as we near the launch. And on that note, we're going to start moving on to more general Illuvium things. And the first one is, how do you and the team feel about the impending launch of the open beta and the Q2 deadline?
So everything that we do is always super exciting internally. We have every month we do a update with the whole team where we all get together and sort of look at what we've done in the past month, what's going to happen in the next month, what is our way forward. And the end of that was incredibly positive, right? Remember, like there's 200 people here. We have 100 people on the team that are all there cheering and putting memes into our internal chats. We go through and look at all of the art assets that have been created. A lot of the devs, they're just heads down, so they don't get to see a lot of the art. And then they look at that meeting and they go, "Oh my god!" Right? Like they see the stuff coming. Things like Taiga Boreal is just looking absolutely mint. The shader work that they have done is just insane. It's huge, right? I mean, internally, the idea with that one has always been, or at least the frustration has been, it's too big, right? There's a place where you can fall for something like 45 seconds, right? It's just humongous. And so the team is super pumped about what we're doing. The deadline is obviously going to quickly approach, but we're confident. We have someone who's been on the team for quite a while now, who used to be in the community, who is helping us to plan out as best we can the ETAs on all of these things to really nail down exactly all of the things that we need to do. Because again, like this is not one game where we're talking about it being like, if it was one game, I could do the production of it myself and all of the planning, and I reckon I'd be perfectly fine. We'd be super accurate on the dates. We have 21 products that we have, everything from the investing platform Forge to the Illuvidex, what was formerly the Illuviary, which we're sort of calling the Index now as part of the Illuvidex. There's just a gigantic amount of things that we have to do, and planning all of that is tough. But this guy is like probably one of the smartest people that I've ever known, and he used to be a mod. He helped us out really well when we had the hack in setting up the way our Discord is set up, right? And he was the only person who could understand what I wanted. I was like, this is exactly what I want. And he was like, I get you. Everyone else that I asked to help with that, they had no idea what I was talking about, and he just knew it straight away. So he's helping us to plan out everything to make sure that we can hit our deadlines. We internally are willing to accept quality compromises to make sure that we get things done. If it means, our art team hates me and they don't like the idea of having pink undies on Bark, but whatever we need to do to get live, we're going to get live. So we are super pumped. And like I said, me personally, I'm pumped for probably 6 more milestones after that as well.
every single time you finish speaking, I'm still processing, I'm still understanding, and it's still blowing my mind. Let's be real. Okay, so we've got a couple quick ones here. Firstly, coming from Sith, what happened to the monthly blogs? Or do you want to do a monthly anime? How's that sound?
So I'm open for a monthly AMA. It would not be the same thing as the monthly blog. We're actually investigating a new way of doing it, which would be more of like a video way of doing it, because the blogs, they take a reasonable amount of time for me to set them up. And we were finding that there was not a heap of engagement with it. There are some people that really loved it, no doubt, right? I get the idea that there's a lot of people that love it, but when you include sort of the way that we have sort of piecemeal let content come out, I don't think that there's like a huge value there. Whereas as a bit more of a marketing tool to show people, hey, you guys can't read, you don't know how to do it. Everyone lost that skill about 20 years ago, but you do know how to watch videos. So we're looking at ways of doing that. I say that lovingly. No one can read, not me, not anyone. There's like 5 people in the world that can actually read something and go, I understood that anymore. We're all just, I guess, too into the TikTok era. Anything that takes longer than 13 seconds to read goes straight out of our brains. So I just, it was a decent amount of work for me to do for, I think, not a huge amount of effort. I'm open to the possibility of continuing doing it, but at the moment we're trying to test out just doing a good overall video showcase of what it is. We're not there yet. It'll probably be a month or so before we get one of them, but I think that that'll have a lot of engagement, right? I think that will be the way that most people will engage with being up to date, is to be able to see the Ranger doing this cool new thing, rather than me saying we're nearly there yet. We can just show you a unfinished version of it, and you can effectively compiling all of our leaks into something that's longer, more comprehensive, and just a little bit more polished.
Yeah, almost like an Illuvium showcase, almost.
Like the showcases, but something that is built more for just general YouTube consumption, rather than it being live and needing production value behind it. It'll allow us to sort of do things behind the scenes to make it look really good. And then we can just show you, hey, here's a feature. And if that's done, say, once a month, then I think people will really get a good understanding of how quickly we are building things.
Yeah, I love it. I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be good. And even though I really did enjoy reading the blogs, I think it makes sense in this modern era for sure, like you said. So the next question is a bit of a weird one. If you went back in time 2 years, or let's say 2.5, 3 years, what would you do differently when kicking off the development of Illuvium?
I would probably be a lot more firm in the scope of what we're trying to build, and be a little bit more adamant of starting small and building out from there. That's probably the most important thing. What is very hard to see early on is when you list out all of the things that you want to build and you look at them all individually and you say, okay, yeah, this requires X, Y, and Z, and then this requires X, Y, and Z. It's very tempting to say that the amount of time taken to build all of it is to just add them all up. What you don't realize, or at least what I didn't realize at the time, and has definitely become apparent over time, is there's a certain amount of cognitive load that is placed on your head to be balancing all of those projects that are getting built at the same time. And it makes it incredibly, incredibly hard to do. And it's not just for me as a designer or a director, it's also for the team, because they will often switch between doing work on a particular thing and then moving over to another one. And then by the time they go back, it takes them a little bit of time to remember exactly the way that the code base is set up. And so there's definitely a lot more of a difficulty there. I don't think there's any way we could have built the game out by only being in one area, especially considering it was during COVID that we were doing it. So I would say having one location would have made it easier. A lot of the communication issues that come about tend to come about because everything has to be done through meetings and documentation, and sometimes things slip through the cracks. But I'd probably crack down and try to keep the team a little bit more local, even if it meant, like, let's say, like, most of our people are from Europe, maybe just saying we only hire from Europe. And maybe it means that the founders who are in Australia have to be up at weird times. That's no problem. Just having everyone be in Europe may have been a better way to go, because then everyone's at least in the same time zone. It's hard to say that, though, because we have some really brilliant people that are not from Europe that have made massive contributions to the game. I don't want to try and trivialize anything that anyone on the team has done, but it's probably more of a logistics thing that I would change with the game, and just tamping down on that scope, keeping everything a little bit more simple, maybe being a little bit more cautious with the way that the assets look in the game versus on the NFTs, right? The NFTs, I would never compromise there and say they should be incredibly high quality, but inside of the game, maybe we could have been a little bit more forgiving, because it does take that extra amount of development effort to build around there. But now that we've built it, it gives us a point of difference, because no one else is doing that, mainly because it takes that extra time and that expertise to be able to do. But our community has to be patient with us, because it is definitely more difficult to produce games of this high quality art assets than something like a Minecraft.
Yeah, I think you actually got really lucky with the boom of AI, which kicked off about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where it's going to cause a lot of games to start looking just like one another, but where you've handcrafted all of your assets, your game will still be differentiated for many, many years to come, as AI is focused in a lot of the easier areas or the areas that are more common, things like your Minecraft and your Pokemon styles and things like that are going to become more and more common. Whereas Illuvium will always have that differentiator against the AI space, which I think is quite advantageous to us in a certain sense as well. So I really like that.
It's one of those things where I look at some studios that I like massively respect in the way that they've gone about it. At the end of the day, the IP is what like keeps things going long term. A lot of companies will make a single game that's nice and simple, build up a player base, and then build the IP after that. We've obviously built out the IP from the very beginning. And the main reason for that is because it's in the collection space. The IP is a big part of that collection. So it is a different way of going about doing it. But at the end of the day, if you want to have longevity, you definitely need to have an IP that is its own. And I think that there's definitely a lot of projects out there that do look very samey. Maybe we'll even have lawsuits thrown against them for looking too samey to other things. And we absolutely don't look like anything that anyone's ever seen, right? There's no one out there that has stuff the way that we're doing it. And that is definitely a massive advantage for us.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more. So the next question I've got actually comes from Sneaky Poke, where he asks, what does the marketing strategy look like heading into the Illuvium Open Beta?
I can't talk much about it because, again, I'm not on our marketing team. So I think Kieran at some point will sort of give you guys the next parts of the direction. But in general, our marketing from my perspective is make a game that lots of people love to play, right? My major focus for the last month and a half is fixing some of what I would call the deficiencies with Arena and with Overworld to make them more engaging. And that includes making onboarding a lot easier. I've been going over for now a week and a half on really tweaking our intro sort of onboarding to the world to make sure that it feels organic, to make sure that it injects some humor and lets people understand where they are in the world. It's not just a bunch of text that pops up on the screen and goes blah, 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 you know, like you see in a lot of games these days. It's real recordings of people, like voice actors that are very high quality, animations that people really enjoy. We won't have a lot of NPCs in the world at launch, and there's a really good reason for that. You just crashed onto an abandoned, destroyed world, right? There's no one there, right? There's only you and your team, and you're all getting into it. But over the course of the next year or so, we will integrate more and more of those NPCs into the world, which will make it feel more lived. And it'll feel more lived because you will have lived in it for that period. It'll feel super organic because there'll be a building that will pop up and you'll be like, oh, cool. And it'll feel like going down the road and being like, oh, they knocked down the old theater and they put up a high rise or whatever. That's how it will work. So for us, it's just about making sure that we get a player base that really wants to recommend the game to other people, that has people really salivating to collect all of the creatures. And to me, that is the best way that marketing can be done at its core, is build good games. We're not there yet, but I think that we're getting much, much closer with the stuff that we're putting into the game in the last few months.
Yep, you got me sold. I'll be playing day one. I did have a really interesting question for you, though. Do you think 3 fuels is necessary for the entire ecosystem? Why couldn't we achieve the exact same thing with just 1 fuel?
Right. I think some people might look at it the other way around and say, like, why can't there be 50 fuels? The main reason why we have 3 fuels there is because we wanted there to be a point of difference in Illuvium 0 in order to allow people to make meaningful decisions. If there is just one fuel, I mean, obviously, for every other game, that is 100% totally possible, right? You could just use one fuel for all the other games. It's just a payment method, like gems in Mahjong or anything like that, right? You just, whatever it happens to be, you could just have that. But the people playing Illuvium 0, they've already gone through a game of what region do I want to be in? What sort of what deposits do I want to have in my world, and what fuels do I want to be able to extract, and at what rate, right? If we get a variance in the value of each of those fuels, there are people in Illuvium 0 who will be able to profit off of that. There will be other people that will have to pivot into that, right? One of the not so interesting things about the blockchain space is, I guess, arbitrage, right? Where you get a chance to look at what someone else is doing, what price there is for something, and use that to your advantage to make a little bit of profit on the fact that there is a differential there. It's not super interesting when we're talking about bots doing it on the blockchain, but when you're a person who's building up your base, you have to look at the real world price of things to work out what your strategy is going to be. What extractors are you going to build? What generators are you going to build? How are you going to set out your plot? If there is a living, breathing world that has fluctuating prices, then every day you go in, that's part of your research, right? What am I going to do today? Am I going to sell this fuel? Am I going to hold it? Does that mean that I'm going to run out of storage? Am I forced to sell it at a low price? Maybe that feels bad. And then you think, oh, damn, I've got to destroy this thing over here to make another storage facility so that that doesn't happen to me again. All of that to me is super exciting. Yes, it's more of a strategy type game, but that's really what Illuvium 0 is about that strategy building game. And we want to build in as many things as possible that are similar to how people think about things like SimCity or Factorio, but instead of it being just for the purpose of building something that's not really real, in our game, you are literally generating assets that other people are going to be using, right? They are going to physically be using the stuff that you have got. And that to me makes that all interesting. At the moment, people don't really feel that because there's no connection to it. Once the fuel exchange goes live, and there is a connection between those two, people will start to think, and then it'll be much more of an engaging app than what it is at the moment.
I was always coming from the point of mind of like the overworld and how it might be overcomplicating some of those sorts of decisions where you just kind of want one currency and you're using it to upgrade your equipment, make your shards and all the rest of it, instead of having to try and buy all these different currencies. But as long as the front end for that has a good user experience, I definitely think it's fine. Yeah. I definitely think it's important to keep the strategy in Illuvium 0 as well.
Just remember that most people will just have ETH in their wallets. And when they go to purchase, they will just buy it in ETH, right? And the fuel exchange will do the work for you, right? Yes, it will cost you X amount of solons to do some interaction. You might have no solons, right? You can buy them and store them because you might think that they're going to go up in value later on and all sorts of things like that, right? But if you just have ETH, then what will happen is when you go to do that action, it will look it up on the fuel exchange, work out the price, it'll take your ETH, it'll swap it for that particular fuel, and then it'll burn that fuel to do the action. All of that will happen in a single click. So you won't need to worry about how it all works, because if you don't, as long as you have ETH in our system, you'll be fine. Or SILV2, right? As long as you have either of those two things, it'll always be fine. You won't need to be like, I need to get 5 of this, and then I need to buy that. That is available to you so that you can store it based on you thinking that you know better than the market how things are going to play out. So you can buy them and hold. And then when you go to do some interaction, it'll just deduct it from you. But if you don't have it It's not going to matter to you. So I don't think it's going to complicate anything. But what I do think is that in Illuvium 0, it makes that experience much better. So it's like positive over here, neutral over there. I don't think it becomes a problem at all.
Awesome. All right. I've got one last big one for you before I look at the chat and maybe answer one or two over there.
Sure.
But here's a really interesting one. Since you know the team quite well, how long do you genuinely think it would take to design 3 to 4 more new Illuvial lines and implement them into the games?
So because it's a pipeline, the process from start to finish is, if our full team is working on it, or at least the full team that can be working on it works on it, it's around about a 3-month round trip, right? From ideation through to it's integrated into the game. Each individual stage of that is around about just over a week, right? So to do 4 of them, let's call that 6 weeks. So I would estimate that it would be 6 weeks plus that round trip of 3 months, around about 4.5 months it would be to have them integrated straight into the game. Probably a little bit quicker considering we're going a lot faster now, but I'm just looking historically at how it's gone. I'm being very conservative with it because obviously there's people that normally do that work that might do other work instead. Sorry, it's so hot here and it's getting the pollen up in the air, so I'm getting a little bit maybe allergies. But yeah, probably 4 months.
Yeah, because I think that's really exciting, especially I've always found, especially I played League of Legends for 6 or 7 years maybe. I've always found that them adding a new champion to the game every 2 or 3 months or so was a big reason I was able to hold that retention.
Yep.
I definitely think adding Illuvials as frequent, it doesn't need to be 100 Illuvials at once, but adding Illuvials as frequently as possible will do a lot to benefit the entire Illuvium game, especially since you might enter a region and be like, I might find this Illuvial I've never seen before. And that's a really great way to get people to return to the game if they haven't played in a little while or they haven't gone to a certain region. And that really excites me in particular. And so it's good to see that it doesn't have a huge turnaround or anything like that.
We'll keep in mind that we're effectively done, right? There might be like a couple of tiny little things that we're doing. Plus there's some animations that we're working on now for new features that aren't done yet. So I can't say that we're 100% done because those new animations are very pertinent to what we're building out in some of the other games besides, say, Arena. But for the most part, we are effectively done. So we finished 206 Illuvials in 3 years, and our team went significantly faster towards the end of that. And we had far fewer people working on it towards the end as they started to do other things. So if we wanted to release 50 Illuvials, it's definitely doable in under a year. But keep in mind that our plan is to release them as sets, and most of the Illuvials in a new set will be some type of variation of existing ones, right? Because the way that we see it is just like people want to be able to capture Pikachu in new sets of Pokemon. We want them to be able to do that, but we absolutely don't want them to be able to get original Pikachu unless they got it early on, right? And they can't even hold packs of cards in our game. They have to go and collect it. So it will be a very finite number of Illuvials that exist of any particular set. And what that will mean is, just like you say, we'll probably have 5 or so new lines that will be completely new things, right? We already showed Kama is the stage 1 for the chameleon line. And that's a really cool one that will sort of have a little bit of mimicking technology built into it. But it'll allow us to be very, very specific with adding interesting new ones to the game. They're not just going to be like, we've covered a lot of different styles of character. If we want to make new ones, we really have to think about it. And so those 5 will be really, really thought out. And then the others will be a different variation, maybe of Atlas or maybe of Ramfire. and it won't be the original, and so probably it won't be quite as valuable, but it will allow people to continue on with the game. And we don't plan on making our units obsolete. We're not going to say, hey, that's from set 2, so therefore you can't play with it anymore. So we need to be very cautious about how many new ones we add. So it effectively will be very similar to the League of Legends strategy of about 3 or 4 a year. I know at one point they were doing about 1 every 2 weeks, and that got to be a little bit of a disaster. But we'll probably do something like 5 a year or something like that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Maybe a little bit higher, but I think that makes sense.
We'll see.
So I've got a few questions in the chat, or at least I did. Hold on. Bwayne Spark wants to know if you can tell us anything about the Leviathans. And I would love to know any little amount of leak. Seeing that Leviathan in the hype trailer was, it was mind-blowing.
You've seen a lot of Leviathans so far, is a leak that I would say, right? You've already seen them, and they're pretty big, right? But it's really hard to go into Leviathans without talking about like the lore and why the world is destroyed and stuff like that. It's like the reason why we called them Leviathan is because not just they're big, like Leviathan sort of means giant monster, but also I guess you would say a very ancient monster as well. So there's a reason why we have them there, but you've seen more of them than what you think.
I had a few tweets when people were commenting on my Ask Aaron questions thing, and a bunch of the comments were like, ask him for a leak, but make sure it's not a riddle.
I mean, I can leak certain things that are fine to leak, but then there's certain other things that I certainly can't. But I mean, hey, riddles are good, right? I mean, eventually maybe we do a puzzle game or something. Probably after doing a few action games, but I'm down for some puzzles.
I find riddles fun. There's another question here from Illuvium Master, who I'm assuming is Sky, and he's asked this more than once now. Will Dust be available at Open Beta? I have no idea what Dust is.
Dust?
Yeah, and I don't think he's referring to the synergy. I'm really not sure. You don't know what he's talking about?
I think he means will we release maybe it's the Illuvials from the Dust synergy?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, I'm trying to think what it could possibly be.
It might be related to Illuvium Beyond and disintegrating things.
Okay,
Roger just said dust substance. Yeah.
Okay, substance. Its official name is substance, right? I thought it might be that, right? So, substance is something that plays a larger role in like the communal goal of the game. Every time you go out into the region or a region, you'll be collecting some of that, and it'll be useful for your society, right? So every time it would be like, imagine every time someone buys a pack of cards, they get a little bit of a notch towards some community goal, right? That's probably the best that I can describe it as. And in Illuvium Beyond, the plan is that if there's something that you don't like, you should be able to disintegrate that down into substance to be able to add to more of that communal feel. The other part of it is that there's not just the communal side of it. There is also a selfish side of being able to use it for various things. And I can't go into exactly the details of what you might use it for, but effectively there's like the selfish side of it and then the communal side of using it. But it will be pretty hard for us to get that in for open beta. It's not necessary for the Beyond connection to be in there. And at the moment, we're very focused on the other games and getting them out on time. But as soon as we get a chance to, we'll look at connecting that up. There's a whole bunch of connections between all the different games that we want to do, which will, again, help that feeling of purpose. You'll get something from one game, you'll bring it over into another game, and it'll feel like everything is connected. But it does take time. I would say that a large amount of that extra connecting stuff is what we would say is the effort between open beta and having the fully polished game.
That's awesome. I think that's very good to leave it there. I didn't even know about all that. Clearly, a lot of people in the community were aware of that entire thing. But I think that's going to be really awesome. I'm assuming that's tied to factions in some way.
Yep.
Yeah. So that is awesome. Thank you so much for your time on this Australia Day today, Aaron. I really appreciate it. Anyone in the chat or watches this video later or whatever, don't forget to use my link down below to go and check out the Illuvium game, the website, download the game and all the rest of it. I really appreciate it. It also really helps support me, so don't forget to click it. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us off on before we wrap this one up?
I just want to say, like, there's obviously been a little bit of negativity in the community with Grant leaving the project, and I just want to definitely reassure everyone that Grant would not leave with a team that can't handle the art load that we have to do. I think it's pretty clear from what I've said today that from an art perspective, apart from a few cool things into the future that we're doing, we are nearly there for a large percentage of it. Maybe the regions need to be uplifted a little bit, and they're definitely going to take a long time, considering we're talking about like 50 square kilometers of world that we're building out. But the team is exceptional, and I think Grant would definitely appreciate the positivity that came in after his message. He's my brother. I want to make sure that all of my brothers are super happy in whatever they do. So I'm happy that he's choosing to do something that is going to, I think, make him happier in the long term. And I am in no way at all fearful for Illuvium without him on the team. I love him. I will beg him to come back if we do a Netflix series or something like that. He'll probably get the itch too. But for now, I think it's a good time for him to leave it to some other people who can help us for the next phase. I mean, Roger has been the art director now for, I don't know, maybe close to 6 months, and has been doing a killer job of it. And that'll just continue. We're getting really, really good with our communication and stuff like that. So as much as it might be sad, there's 100% a lot of people in the community that see him as, like, you know, the best one. He's definitely the chaotic good of us three brothers, right? He's definitely the most fun one when it comes to that sort of stuff. So I can appreciate people feeling sad that he's leaving. But as far as us as a project and as a team of core contributors, I would very strongly say that with the work that we've done in the last probably 2 months with the team in getting the balance of all of the different positions in the team, internally, the guys would know that there's definitely been some shuffle and some change that has happened. Mm-hmm. I would say almost all of it has been massively positive. We have almost not lost anyone that is like a huge part of the team. We brought on a lot of people that we've desperately needed in some areas that are now helping us to build things out super quick. I've lamented in the past about certain areas of the team where we just found it difficult to hire. We have now done that. We have a team that I think is phenomenal, and Grant definitely thinks that too. I speak to him on a daily basis even now, and yeah, we're both very excited about the future. For him, it will be more as I guess a community member, and he'll start pinging me with whens very, very soon. And that'll help spur me on to make things go faster. But everyone else on the team, myself, Kieran, all of the team that we've got, are just pushing as hard as we can to get this out in a reasonable time for you guys.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. For anyone who doesn't know, this is actually a public holiday for both me and Aaron. And so we're taking our time out today to give you this AMA. And thank you for all your support.
I'm straight back into work now. Okay, I'll